Chances are if you've ever seen a previous video on this channel, then you've seen one of the Meltdown videos. They're consistently, whether we like it or not, the most viewed videos here on the channel. So I think the time has probably come where we have a bit of a chat about meltdowns. Hello folks and welcome to another video in the Parenting an Autistic Child series. I'm Kev and my 13-year-old son Andy has autism, and a lot of the videos on this channel are about our lives as an autism family. In this series we pick a particular topic to do with being an autism family and take a deep dive on it once a week. This week we're going to be talking about meltdowns, but we do have a playlist of previous videos in this series which you can find up there. If you feel like you would find a series like this or a channel like this helpful, then make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn those notifications on so that you don't miss out on any of our future videos. Today's topic is meltdowns, which is a topic that from when we first started doing this series, we always knew we were going to have to broach the topic of meltdowns at some point. As I hinted at in the intro, anyone who's ever seen one of our videos has almost certainly seen one of our meltdown videos. At the time of recording, the two most viewed videos on the channel are both meltdown videos. They're two of only three that are on the channel, the most recent one being earlier this week, which is why it feels like the right time to make this video, because it's kind of a current topic for us. But we've probably had, in fact, let me check. We've had over 2 million views on this channel, specifically looking at meltdowns in people with autism. So I guess we need to chat about it. And as with all of the videos in this series, we'll start off by having a little bit of a chat about our experiences and his experiences with the topic. And then we're going to dive into all of your experiences and questions that have come in on our community page over the course of the last few days. As ever, we post next week's topic on the community page fairly early in the following week. So if you want to make sure your question is answered next week, then get following the community page. It's another reason to subscribe to the channel. Keep an eye on the community page, and as soon as you see the topic come up, make sure you submit your question and upvote those ones that you think you would find most interesting to hear us answer. So, meltdowns. Now, the biggest thing that I wanted to get out of the way right up front in this video is, if you don't understand what an autism meltdown is, it can be very, very easy to confuse them with temper tantrums. It is the most common misconception on this topic. And full disclosure, I didn't know the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum 6 years ago when I first met Andy. But over the course of getting to know him, learning the situations, learning what triggers meltdowns, learning how they work, obviously huge amounts of research through reading and talking to other people and watching other videos, I think I now have a pretty good grasp of what the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum is. And it really comes down to the reasons for the behaviour, because the actual behaviour that they cause can be very similar. The kind of things that could happen during a meltdown from an outsider looking in are screaming, shouting, kicking, punching, losing control of emotions, losing control of what's happening physically, and they're very similar to what you would observe happening in someone who is having a temper tantrum. But the crucial difference between the two is, with a meltdown, the person having the meltdown is not in control of that at all. They've become overwhelmed by a situation. It could be due to a sensory overload or a completely overwhelming situation that they don't have a way to process, and it just becomes out of their control. With Andy, this usually presents itself with screaming, shouting, crying, and not so much anymore, but previously violent outbursts, throwing things, hitting, punching, kicking, biting, just trying to make the overwhelming situation go away, literally lashing out at it, trying to get himself out of the situation that he's in, whether it's a situation that's caused by being told no, that used to be a big thing, or something that wasn't expected, or just something that he's afraid of or doesn't understand. With a temper tantrum, then the person having that is in control. They're trying to achieve something. They're trying to get their own way, usually. And that is the massive difference between the two that you must understand before we go any further, because otherwise it can be very easy to just sort of dismiss this as, just get your kids under control, or just stop screaming and shouting. And I mean, stuff like that is it's so ignorant and insulting to anyone with autism or their families, and it does make the situation 10 times harder to cope with. And if I could hope for one thing to come out of a video like this or a series like this, it would be for there to be more awareness out there in the world of what meltdowns are, how to recognize them when they're happening, and what to do to support the person having the meltdown and anyone that they might be with when it's happening, because it's so easy for someone who doesn't understand autism to just want to scream and shout right back at them and try and control them the way you would try and control a naughty child. And they're just different things. They don't work that way, and that approach is only going to make things a million times worse. Getting specific with Andy, I've already mentioned a lot of the things that trigger his meltdowns, or should I say used to trigger his meltdowns, because meltdowns used to be a daily occurrence for us. When his anxiety was at its absolute height, when he was at the height of his school refusal, when he was really struggling, anything could set him off. It could be that the crisps weren't, his bag of crisps had a slightly different barcode on. That was a real thing that sent him off into a meltdown and meant he wouldn't eat those. Even now, he still won't eat crisps out of a bag because he doesn't want to have to check the meltdown, because he doesn't want to have to check the barcode, because he remembers how traumatic an experience it's been in the past that the barcode numbers changed slightly and he then couldn't eat out of those crisps. Or it could be something major like trying to get him to school. That used to be a big one for us. Or being asked to do something that he doesn't want to do, go out shopping, go out of the house at all, stop doing what he wants to do. So if he's playing on his iPad or his PlayStation, being asked to stop doing that, or just anything that's kind of out of routine, any kind of surprise, anything that he's not expecting or doesn't like, used to set him off into a meltdown. And at that point, it would be, you could write off at least the rest of that half of the day, the rest of the morning, the rest of the afternoon, because it would be 2 to 3 hours to go through the process of trying to keep him safe while he's at the height of it, because like I say, he would be kicking, screaming, shouting, throwing, biting, punching anyone and anything that was anywhere near him. So if we're near him, he's going to be hitting out at us. If we're not near him, he's going to be hitting out at things and potentially hurting himself or other people if there's other people there. And he's completely out of control. And it literally used to have to be a case of wrap him up tight, hold him close, or pin him down, or just get him through that initial stage, keep him calm, keep him safe so he's not banging his head into the floor or the wall, not hurting himself in any way. Just try and minimise that movement whilst applying the pressure that comforted him and helped him sort of re-establish his sensory centre. And once he got through that, it would be a lot of crying, a lot of sobbing, a lot of saying sorry, and just he would be absolutely distraught and very upset for a long time afterwards. And then he'd just want to be on his own to just shut himself off from everything else that was going on around him. Sometimes he'd go and sleep. Sometimes he'd just want to be in a room by himself. He used to shut himself into his wardrobe. What he didn't want was conversation. He didn't want to discuss what had happened. He didn't want to talk about it. And he certainly didn't want us to think, right, you've calmed down now. Now can we do this? No, whatever that thing was, we're done with that now. We're not going to go back to trying to get him to go to Tesco or try and go back to getting him to try that food or whatever it might have been. These days, though, he is much more in control, and it's largely thanks to the medication that he takes. He now takes fluoxetine for anxiety, and the way that was described to us when he was first prescribed it, the doctor said it's not going to stop him from being anxious, and it's not going to stop him from. It won't prevent meltdowns. But what it will do is it gives him just that little bit of space to think through situations, and just a little bit of a buffer between the bad thing happening, whatever the bad thing might be, and rather than the bad thing happening and the immediate reaction being meltdown like it used to be, he now has this little gap in between caused by the Prozac, which just gives him time to think, right, is there anything else I can do about this? How do I want to react about this? And as we've seen this week, sometimes it does still lead on to a meltdown. Very rarely. He's only had 3 in the last year, I think. 3 in the last 2 years. Well, maybe 3 in the last year and a half. Full meltdowns. He still has times where he doesn't want to cooperate, where he's unhappy, but he's able to keep himself in control while he's doing that. And that, for us, has been a massive amount of progress, and the medicine has been a huge part of that. And obviously us learning to understand what's going on a lot more has been a big help with that as well. So it's it's always going to be there as something that can happen at any time. We certainly weren't expecting it to happen this week when it did, and we always have to be prepared for it to happen when it does. But thankfully for us, it's not a daily occurrence anymore. So let's move on to having a look at your experiences and questions with the topic of meltdowns as well. And we've got a couple of people kicking us off with sharing their own experiences this week, which I like. You don't always have to ask questions. Sometimes just sharing a story with the rest of us is just as helpful. So Anna says, not Anna, different Anna. Until I was 16, I had very bad meltdowns as I struggled to tell my family what was upsetting me. Medication and therapy didn't work for my Asperger's. My family let me choose a cat age 17, and because of her, I stopped my meltdowns a year later. I seem to understand how it felt for her when I had one. It used to be so bad my neighbours 5 doors away heard me. See, that's just amazing how I've just sat and explained how the one thing that was able to help Andy was medication. We tried animals, we tried the dog, we got Dave for Andy like 3 years before he went onto medication. It had no impact on Andy at all, and it was the medication that worked for him. With Anna, medication not working at all, but it was getting an animal that helped. And it just shows how completely different every circumstance is. So although most of the answers to questions I'm going to give you in this video are specifically about Andy, please don't think that means that's how it is for everyone who has autism, because everyone is different, and that's a perfect example of it. Theon says, I work with a non-verbal autistic boy in gymnastics. It's harder to calm him down because of the busy environment. We have textured inflatable balls and yoga balls. He really enjoys them. He hasn't had a meltdown with us in years because he's comfortable in the environment. We also take him to a quiet part of the gym if he's too stimmed, which keeps his mood fairly consistent. See, that again, perfect way to handle the situation. You're not just setting up rules for this is what we do with the autistic people, that it's right, we need to get to know this lad, this is what he likes, this is what he doesn't like, let's make an environment that works for him. That's what they've done. It's worked. That is how you handle meltdowns. And as we've shown with Andy, as Fion's showing with the boy that she works with, if you get the environment right and the situation right, you can massively minimise the number of meltdowns that are happening, because largely meltdowns are happening because of being afraid of the situation, not understanding the situation, or some kind of sensory overload. So that's a great way to get around them. Let's get into some questions then. So do your daughters help Andy and talk to him through a meltdown, or do they leave it to Anna or you? I think they would. If it was just the girls there, they absolutely would. They've seen what we do and would know how to do it. But we ask them not to get involved, mainly because of the potential for violence, kicking, screaming, shouting. We don't want the girls to have to pin Andy down. I don't think that's a good situation to be in. So we ask them to just leave us to it. They'll go up to their rooms, or Andy will go up to his room and we'll go with him, or out into the garden like we did on the most recent one. But yeah, we ask them not to be involved. They would, but we don't want them to. How have Andy's meltdowns changed as he's grown up? Other than getting less frequent, which I don't know how much of that is put down to growing up, I think most of that is medication. The way they work hasn't really changed very much at all. It's always been scream, shout, get violent, and then cry a lot. That's always been the model for them. Usually get naked is in there somewhere too. Have you ever had a positive experience with a member of the public during one of Andy's meltdown? We had one once where a shop assistant asked us if he'd like a cardboard box from the display, which is one of his favourite things, to try and calm him. I don't think we have. I mean, we've had indifferent experiences. We've had some experiences that you would expect to be bad that weren't necessarily. We always reference the time he got naked in the co-op, lied on the floor, refused to leave. And the staff, although they didn't do anything positively to help, really, there's nothing that they could do. They asked if there was anything they could do. We said no. They left us to it. They didn't ask us to leave. They didn't get annoyed that there was a naked boy in their shop. They understood the situation and just let Anna deal with it until I got there. So I guess that would be a positive experience for a member of the public, because they understood he wasn't just having a temper tantrum. They didn't ask Anna to get him under control. They didn't try and throw her out of the shop. They just kind of left them to it. Which, when you consider that for probably a good 20 minutes, half an hour or so, there was a naked 12-year-old boy shouting at the top of his lungs and lying on the floor in the entranceway to their supermarket, and they just let that happen, that's a pretty positive experience. Thumbs up to the co-op. And generally, that's the kind of, I think more often than not, we certainly just seem to get ignored, which is kind of how we like it. We don't want people looking, we don't want to form a crowd, and there's little to nothing that anyone else can do to help in the situation. So it's often best just to leave us to it. We know what we're doing, and it hasn't happened in public. since that day at the co-op, I don't think. So thankfully, oh no, there was the time at the church as well last year. There's a video on that on the channel too. Yeah, that was challenging. But the cleaner who was there for that, she was really supportive, really helpful. So yeah, usually most people are good people and will try to help any way that they can. Do you think children in schools should be taught and made more aware of the different disabilities? For example, if they decide to have children of their own later in life, do you think they'd be more accepting of people with disabilities, especially their own children? I mean, raising awareness is always good, but there are so many different disabilities and so many different examples of how the disabilities present themselves in different people. It's realistically probably not practical. I think any parent who needs help accepting their own children probably shouldn't have been having children in the first place, because if you can't accept your own kids, there's really no hope for you. But yeah, awareness is always good. I don't know if you need to have a bunch of lessons on autism, a bunch of lessons on ADHD, a bunch of lessons on whatever, we could go on and on and on and on and on. I think the message through society as a whole needs to be, just be accepting of the people around you. Everyone's different. Different isn't a bad thing. Different is not broken. T-shirt slogan. Just everyone's different. Everyone handles things in their own way. Just be accepting of other people. Get to know them as individuals and try and act in their best interests. And that way you don't need to get specific on the conditions. When Andy has a meltdown, how does it affect me and Anna? Do we guys have a routine? Does Anna have a... I can see that's a very long question. I'm going to just kind of answer the first part of it. We do have a routine for what we do. Generally, we tag team it if we're both there. I do the first bit, she does the second bit. And the first bit is all about keeping him safe, which as he's got bigger, is really difficult for Anna now, because Andy's bigger than Anna and he's stronger than Anna. So in the past, she used to be able to do the whole thing herself. But the first step is usually getting him out of any dangerous situation that he's in. So that could mean picking him up and moving him. It could mean just gripping him tight so that he can't hurt himself or hurt other people. It could mean sort of pinning him down where he is, just again to stop him from hurting himself. But my job is literally to get him through the aggressive, violent stage. I'm there to be his punch bag and to make sure that he doesn't headbutt the floor or scratch at his eyes or bite himself or bite us. So that's my bit, the physical bit. Once he's calmed down, and when you're holding him tight while it's happening, you feel the tension start to go out of him. He's still very upset. There's still no communicating with him. But you get past that violent stage, and at that point, that's where Anna steps in, because what he needs then is kisses, cuddles, soft voice, all that stuff that I'm not great at. And that's the bit that you saw in the video from last week where I was filming out the window. Anna and Andy sat on the trampoline. I'd been really heavily involved in the bit where he's naked next to a window upstairs on the landing, of getting him away from the window, trying to get him to get his clothes back on. But yeah, my work was done there. He wasn't a danger to himself. He wasn't a danger to anybody else. At that point, Anna needs to step in and do her part. And that can take anywhere from sort of an hour to a couple of hours. It usually involves playing some gentle music, maybe dimming the lights, letting him lie down. He likes to be stroked either on his head or his arms, or just sort of soft, consistent sensations. And then he'll often sleep it off. So lights off, go to sleep under his covers, even if it's super hot, and sleeps it off. And then he's usually fine. Have you ever been seriously injured because of one of the meltdowns, or has he injured himself? Not seriously. There's been things that have hurt both us and him. He's bitten himself quite badly before. He's bitten Anna really badly before. I think it was on her arm, like there-ish on her arm, and he properly sunk his teeth in. So she had this big purpley black bruise for like a month afterwards, where he really bit into her, sunk his teeth in and didn't let go. And she kind of had to pull her arm out of him really clamped down and biting her. I've had a few blows to the gentleman area. It varies, not deliberately. He's not going for my groin, but headbutts, kicks, wild flailing limbs. It always seems to get me there. The worst one I ever had was not long after I tore my ACL, the ligament in my knee. So my knee was basically all wobbly and all over the place and all swollen up and horrible anyway. We were I know we were at my dad's. We were at the end of my dad's driveway, and he didn't want to get in the car for some reason. I don't remember the details, because all I remember is the shooting pain that happened when I was trying to strap his seatbelt on, and he just kicked me full on into my knee that had a torn ACL, and I just hit the floor. Hit the floor. I looked like a footballer faking an injury, hands to my knee, and just sort of rolling around. Oh, that hurt so much. But he didn't tear my ACL. He just kicked me in an injury that was already there. Do you know if Andy's ever had a meltdown at school? Not a full-on... Well, I guess he probably... Yeah, when he was getting back into the habit of going to school, he would get very close, I think, from the way they were described to us. The school's a great place, though, because they've got safe spaces. They've got these big tent things that you can go into. They've got everywhere where he can just go off, padded walls in the safe space, and just get it out of his system. So it's actually better for it to happen at school than it is at home, because they can just let him go into his safe space, zip it all up, and he's completely safe and fine in there. What's the worst meltdown he's had, and what caused it? The worst one is, I mean, it's probably the one at the church, which was, I'll link to it up there if I remember. I'll certainly link to it down in the description, but we went to the church at the height of when everything was bad. It was before he was medicated. He'd been off school for a long time. We were really, really struggling with him. He had scars all up his face where he'd been picking at spots that he'd had, and they got infected. And we went to see the church, and the door was locked and he couldn't get in, and he just absolutely lost it. And we were parked around the corner, and we were there for over an hour. We filmed maybe bits of the first half hour of it, and then the camera just had to go off, because the story basically ended with Anna having to pretty much pin him down outside the church as he's trying to pull off his clothes, screaming, being violent, because I had to go and bring the car around and pull up outside the church. And then I pretty much had to carry him naked through the churchyard, bundle him into the back of the car. All the while he's trying to bite me, scratch me, kick me, screaming. I thought I was certain the police were going to be called, because, you know, I'm bundling a naked child into the back of my car in a churchyard, but nothing ever came of it. And yeah, that was a bad day. Do you think when Andy has a meltdown, it's important for me and Anna to remain calm? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you can't fight fire with fire. The only way to get around it is to stay calm. You have to be consistent. It has to be routine. You has to know what to expect. And yeah, you must stay calm. If you feel yourself starting to get annoyed at the situation, or even worse, annoyed at him, you have to remove yourself from the situation and just, right, I need to take a few deep breaths, just step away from this for a minute, get some perspective, remind myself that it's out of his control. This is no different from somebody having a fit, or, you know, taking it to the extreme. It's no different from somebody having a heart attack or falling down the stairs. You don't lose it with them for those things because they're physical. Well, this is a mental thing, but it's completely out of his control. You can't get angry with him for having a meltdown. He's suffering far more than we are. No matter how bad we think the situation is, it's 10 times worse for him, and we just got to be there for him. Does he ever cry at times over the meltdowns? Very rarely. Really, really rarely. And just skimming through the questions, it looks like most of the other questions are very similar to the ones I've already answered, or they're asking questions that I kind of already answered in my own intro. So I think I've covered off all of the unique questions that came in. If I didn't get to yours, I apologise if I missed it, or if it was too similar to someone else's to be included. Please make sure you continue to submit your questions for next time. I will try and get around as wide a variety of people as I can in these videos, but we don't want the videos to be an hour long. There's only so many questions we can answer, and as soon as I feel that I'm about to start repeating myself, that's usually a good time to cut it short. So I think we've covered a lot of important ground there today. If you do have any further questions about meltdowns, as ever with these videos, let me have them down in the comments below. There is always scope to do a part 2 to these videos. So if there's a whole load of stuff that you feel like I've not covered, let me know down in the comments. We can do a part 2 a few months down the line and just revisit this topic and talk more about meltdowns, or share your experiences down there as well. It's all very helpful stuff. And if you have enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful, please make sure you leave a nice big thumbs up on there for us. As I said at the start, make sure you subscribe to the channel for the rest of this series, to make sure you're always there ready to ask your questions on the community page, and also for our daily vlog to get to know our family as well. And thank you very much for watching.